This is It's a DS Thing, where every conversation is a step closer to the heart of God. Evelyn and Janet can't wait to share these moments of Bible seeking with you. In every episode, we tackle real issues, share personal stories, and discover the beauty of God's love in the midst of it all. So, if you're ready to be inspired, encouraged, and maybe even challenged a bit, hit that subscribe button now. Join our community of faith seekers, and let's walk this journey together.
Hi guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am so happy it is 2024. It is a new year, and that means that we are starting a whole new journey here on It's a DS Thing. I am so happy to be back with another devotional. I know that in the start of the new year, things can be a little hectic. I know that things can get, it can be super easy to get carried away with the new routine, with the new to-do lists, and all these different things. However, I'm here to remind you that it is important to take some Jesus time. Part of my, what are they called, resolution goals is to have an intentional Jesus time, or quiet time, as others like to call it. And that means just really like digging in and not just checking something off my to-do list. Like, oh, I did my devotional, check. I really want to be consistent with starting my devotional with actually reading maybe a chapter of a book each day, which I highly recommend. James is one of my favorite ones, but those shorter books at the end of the Bible are super good to just begin with, and they have a lot of advice and information. So if you're super into self-help, those are great books to dig into. Anyways, I want to get started with today's devotional because, like I said, it is a short devotional here, but I have a lot to say about this topic. And today's devotional is talking about your weakness. Now, I know it can be a little hard to discuss weaknesses. Sometimes it's a little too vulnerable to share that. And I can tell you that I have a list of weaknesses. And I'm kind of scared to even write them out because there's a lot, but trust me, there is a list in my head that just has all of these flaws. And sometimes in my deepest, lowest moments, I am reminded of these weaknesses, and it can be so hard and so triggering to just believe these lies that you're not good enough, that you have a ton of weaknesses. But let me tell you, there is a solution to that. And I know a lot of people, in order to combat these weaknesses, say, okay, well, you got to look at your strong suit. So instead of looking at your weaknesses, think of the things that you are strong in to combat that. And that can be actually a really good idea. And I think that that is a good solution. However, have you ever thought of just embracing your weaknesses? That is what actually, Paul writes in, 2 Corinthians 12. So I have my Bible here with me for those of you guys who are looking at the video version of this. My Bible is the She Reads Truth, which is the Christian Standard Bible. And I really love it because it makes it super easy to understand. So I highly recommend this Bible. But Paul, what he does is he actually embraces his weaknesses. And we're going to read a little bit about that today. So if you have your Bible, go ahead and grab it. If you're listening to this on the go, you can just go ahead and listen to this, but maybe dig into these verses when you get home. It's found in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, let's start in verse 7. Yeah. So chapter 12, verse 7, it says, "Therefore, so that I would not exalt myself, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to torment me, so that I would not exalt myself." Verse 8, "Concerning this, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times so that it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I will most gladly boast all the more about my weakness, so that Christ's power may reside in me. So I take pleasure in weakness, insults, hardships, persecution, and in difficulties for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Mm. Ooh, just take a moment to kind of reflect on those. He's actually saying that his weakness is made strong in him, in Jesus. How can a weakness be strong? Aren't they antonyms? Like, aren't they supposed to be the opposite of each other? Well, in this case, Paul does a very interesting thing and kind of makes them synonyms almost, right? Okay, there's so much to say. Let me just start off by saying that he says in chapter or in verse 7 that there's a thorn in the flesh. A thorn in the flesh. So that could be anything going on in your life. That could be, like he said, hardships, and difficulties, insecurities, things that just bother you, things that are not good, that are not pretty, something that hurts. He wanted to have this thorn taken away from him. So what did he do? He pleaded to God. And I love how you use the word pleaded. It's probably different in other versions. So I wonder if it's even more kind of like a harsher word. Like he actually pleaded. Like in Spanish, I feel like it's more hard. Like he rogar a Dios. Él le rogó a Dios. So he actually pleaded. Like when you plead someone, like you're on your knees, you're like, please, I will do anything. And how many times have we done that? I know I have. I've literally, when I want something to happen, the first thing I do is I'm like, please God, like I promise I am not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I promise you. And like we make all these empty promises that are probably not going to happen. Like I'm like, I promise that I will not eat chocolate, forever. If you like help me get an A on this test or help me through this work week. And we do that a lot. And I think that Paul would have been in some sort of similar situation where he's like, I am so done. Like these hardships, like I've done everything I could in my power. And this just seems to still be here. Please, God, take this away from me. But what did God do? Did God take it away? Nope, he did not. Like we read, he didn't. He said, my grace is sufficient for you. I love God's answer. That's incredible for me. Because how many times like do we want our thorn to be taken away? And God is like, I have a better plan for you than that. And sometimes it's like, but why don't you love me? Like sometimes it's hard to believe that there is a God out there that will let us keep all these bad things and that will let us go through all these bad things. But he has a plan and we don't understand. We do not need to know everything that has to happen in the future. We just got to trust. He said, my grace is sufficient enough, right? My grace is sufficient for you. Wow. For whatever reason, God did not take that thorn away. But actually, this is great because it kind of shows us how Paul dealt with it. Instead, and I'm here reading these verses over and over, instead of Paul saying, dang it, God, okay, fine, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. You're not taking it away from me. Fine. I will go and do whatever, right? No, it gave Paul the opportunity. It could have gone both ways, but it actually gave Paul the opportunity to do something different. So Paul didn't see God's answer as a glass half empty truth. He actually found a good reason to brag about his shortcomings. And that is what we're talking about today. Just instead, Paul said, you know what? I'm actually going to take these weaknesses and be glad that I have these weaknesses. Why? Because it means that God is with me. I like how what it says here. So in the She Reads Truth Bible, there's a devotion. There's a lot of devotionals in this. And as I was reading it, it's nice to read both at the same time. The devotion says here at the end that our inefficiency helps us press into Christ's sufficiency. Let me read that again because I messed it up. Our insufficiency helps us press into Christ's sufficiency. Wow. Anything that causes us to depend on Christ is a good thing. So whether that's, bad situations, whether that's, a difficulty, if that is going to help us depend more on God, then by all means, let it happen. It can be super hard. For me in the past, it's been breakups. um, I think my breakups were meant to happen in the good way. I don't think I was supposed to be with that person in the long run now that I'm reflecting back on it, but just to think about it, that was actually a good thing. That helped me depend more on God and made me rely more on God. It helped me depend on Him. So it was actually a good thing. So that breakup or those breakups were actually a blessing in disguise. So that can still be, it doesn't have to be a breakup. It can be a difficulty, a financial situation. Those things are blessings in disguise. And maybe you won't know about it until later. Maybe you won't ever know about it. But all you can do in that moment is just depend on God. When we lean on Him, we will always, always find Him strong enough to hold us up. Isn't that amazing? Like our weaknesses, and Paul, this is what he says, he takes pleasure in the weaknesses. So whether that's persecution, hardships, difficulties, when we are weak, that is the opportunity of God stepping in and saying, I am here. I can hold you. It is God's turn to be strong for us. And he doesn't get tired. He's always strong. He holds us up, like the devotional says. And I think that's just wonderful. I couldn't for the longest time fathom that. And it may be a little hard to understand and kind of really dig into. I think until you're really going through hard difficulties, or until you realize you have that conversation with yourself, like, no, like when I am weak, like I'm actually glad that I have these weaknesses because these weaknesses help me depend on God. It helps me get closer to God because I have these difficulties. I know and I can depend on God and I can be digging in His Word a lot more because how hard is it when everything is going smooth, everything is fine, your life is finally, starting off and you're finding this really good pace and you're like, you know what? Everything is going fine. And then you kind of forget that.
Check out Thought of Me by Evelyn N. Diaz. Streaming now on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. Make sure to follow Nettieli Music on Instagram for songs and behind the lyrics. Out now.
Every time I feel like I am failing, your promises remind me why I'm here.
It's going fine. And then you kind of forget that, do you have a Bible? You kind of forget to read or do your devotionals or have your quiet time because you're so busy living in your quote unquote perfect life that you don't have time for God. And so when things turn around and when we do have difficulties, when we do have these things going on in our lives, it actually helps us go back to God. And God reminds us, you're like, hey, before you get too cocky, before you think you're living a perfect life, don't forget that whenever you're going through a financial struggle, you come right back to me. You come running back to me. And I think that we need to get into the habit of not doing that. And I'm the first one to say that I do that a lot. That's one of my resolutions. Like I said, I want to be able to just get in the habit of being in His Word daily, whether my life is going well or not, and whether I have weaknesses or not, which everybody does. So I think with our weaknesses, we are able to depend more on Him. And that's something that I had to learn, and I'm still actually learning because for a long time, I was embarrassed or kind of felt like I was being vulnerable to share my weaknesses with others because I just didn't want people to know that I was struggling with certain things in my life. And I'm like, no, these things are private. Like, why would I have to share this with anybody? Where I would convince myself that it wasn't such a big deal, that I could take care of it on my own when it wasn't. Number one, we need community. Number two, we need God, right? First and foremost, we do need God before we need a community. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, we should not let the enemy keep telling us in our minds, because it can be really easy to just believe those lies that say, like, you have a ton of weaknesses, a lot of flaws, you're not worthy of God's grace. And let me tell you, that is not true. Because we have these weaknesses, we have God. and we need a God. I was reading another devotional really quickly to end before we end this. I was reading another devotional. It's called, let me see, I have it right here. It's called Radiant. It's 90 devotions to reflect the heart of Jesus. It's by Clear, Cleere, Cherry Reeves. And I just bought this kind of on a whim because it looked kind of interesting and I needed another devotional. And actually, she has a devotion on being vulnerable and how vulnerability actually connects us. And the only way we can do that is by sharing our weaknesses with others. And so if you'd like to get the book, it's great. It's a short devotional, very small, but it's great. And it talks about that. Talks about how we need these weaknesses in order to connect with other people. And when we do, it's just great because we all realize that we need God. And so anyways, that is the quick devotional that I wanted to share with you guys today. Whether this is the morning when you're listening to this or in the afternoon, at night, whenever you are, I hope this serves as an encouragement to keep up with your quiet time, to realize that your weaknesses can actually be a good thing, and to just depend more on God and listen to Him and what He's trying to tell you today. So anyways, I hope you guys have a great rest of the year 2024, and I will see you guys later. Bye.
Remember, you are not alone on this journey. We're a community of believers seeking to grow in our faith and understanding of God's Word.